Cam, if you want to start us off.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Cam McCauley. I'm a senior at PC. I'm a psychology and Spanish double major, theology, Latin American studies minor, and I'm here with campus ministry to help moderate today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andres Heredia. I'm a global studies and political science double major with the minor in business innovation. I'm also a sophomore here at PC, and I'm also part of the BMSA marketing committee. And yeah, I'm excited to have our panelists here today. So we're going to start off with introductions. I'm going to start off by introducing Clarence R. Sneed. Clarence is the CEO of S&S Trucking, which is a logistics transportation company hauling aggregate material for contractors throughout the Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut area. S&S Trucking is certified by the state of Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut as an MBE/DBE and by the Small Business Administration as a certified 8A firm. So Sneed attended the State University and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Management and worked for the Opportunity Industrialized Center, OIC, in Providence as a financial aid advisor. In September 1986, he also joined the Rhode Island State Police Academy. And in fall of 1989, he attended Roger Williams University and obtained a second Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice, and in the spring of 1992. In March of 2004, S&S Trucking LLC safety standard was created as a job for retirement when retirement came. And in September 2011, he was also ranked corporal from the state police.
And next we have Etienne Cody, or E, if it's easier. He's been the managing partner for Effortless Laundry and Dry Cleaning since 2008. He's also a local real estate investor. Community engagement is one of his passions. Etienne was the vice president of RI Young Professionals, mentors through Rhode Islanders, sponsoring education, volunteers on political campaigns, among other community involvements. And he hopes to help bridge the gap between the business world and his community to be a part of sustainable growth and prosperity.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Pearl Farquharson. She is a proprietor and creative director of Design by Delcy, a Providence-based boutique wedding planning and design firm specializing in worldwide experiencing and contemporary event design. She is also passionate about the community that she serves. In 2018, she founded Toast, the Empowered Black Women's Collaborative, just as a virtual outlet where women can empower each other and establish relationships and enrich their personal career and entrepreneurial endeavors. Pearl also proudly serves on the board of Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the National Association of Catering Executives, New England, an organization dedicated to cultivating a consistent level of quality standards that contribute to strengthening the integrity of catering and event professionals in New England.
And lastly, we have Lisa Ranglin. She is the CEO of Ranglin and Associates. This is a consulting firm dedicated to helping individuals and organizations perform at their highest level. Lisa is also the founding president of the Rhode Island Black Business Association. She is a sought-after professional who brings over 20 years of corporate experience in project and program management and 10 years of leadership experience in business and community development with the lens of diversity and inclusion to ensure equality of access and opportunities to diverse individuals and communities. Throughout her career, Lisa has been a leader of teams responsible for coordinating all aspects of large, complex, multi-year, multi-million-dollar initiatives with an emphasis on technology, regulatory compliance, process improvement, and organizational change management for businesses within Fortune 500 companies. So thank you all for being here today. Andres is going to start us off with our first question for you all.
So first off, we are going to start with more introductions and names. So if you want to state anything that you want to add to the bio, or just your name, pronoun, and business. So we can start off with Lisa if you want to start us off.
Sure. Lisa, very simple, and she, her. But certainly, I think when I think about who do I show up as, right, it's really around a community leader. So again, Lisa's fine. I'll pass it back over to you.
All right, Clarence, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes.
Good evening to everybody. My name is Clarence Sneed Jr. I'm the CEO of S&S Trucking, LLC, DBA Safety Standards. I am also the current most worshipful Grand Master of the Prince Hall Free and Accepted Masons of Rhode Island, Black Masons. I became the 66th Grand Master in June of 2019. Pleasure to be here this evening.
Thank you. Pro, do you want to go next?
Hello, everyone. Pro Farquharson, owner of Design by Delcy. Pronouns she, her, and really excited to be here. And you've done a fabulous job at introducing me, so I don't need to quite say more.
And last but not least, Etienne, do you want to?
Oh, sure. Yeah, thanks again for having me. I'm Etienne Cody, or E if it's easier, whichever you're comfortable with. Yeah, you covered everything. I'll try to be concise with my bio and in general. I'll probably have the least to say up here, but I'm happy to share and answer any questions. But yeah, so otherwise, education-wise, I went to URI, graduated in 2004. Went to Johnson Wales for a year, so I'm connected to that community, but graduated from URI in 2004. Otherwise, yeah, just like to be involved in the community and run my business and meet great folks like all of you and connect.
Great, thank you. So I have another question, but just first want to offer for all of the people on this Zoom, if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A tab to submit them if you have anything in addition to our questions that we have here. So my next question is to each of you, what motivated you to start your own business? So Pearl, if you want to start, lead us off with what motivated you.
Wonderful. So I guess I'll start with the glamorous part. And in order for me to start with the glamorous part, I have to go way back to when I was 6 years old. And I was always so mesmerized by the fact that if you were to bring people of whatever background, gender, age together around a really great meal and a table, like it would be impossible for them to fight with a good meal around the table. And I was always so intrigued by this and the fundamentals of hospitality. And so my mom always had this saying, being born and raised by two immigrant parents from Jamaica, that she had this saying since I was 6 years old, that if you have manners, you can dine with the king and queen of England. And I was 6 years old. I'm like, what exactly does this mean? And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll figure this out. But in theory, I thought that me going into hospitality, even at the age of 6, if I had manners, if I could get to know someone's culture through food and their experiences, that will be my literally my contribution to world peace. So that was what kind of catapulted my decision to pursue a degree in hospitality, and I really fell in love with it. I loved the way that I was able to cultivate a dream and experience for my clients and see their faces at the end of the night where they're like, my goodness, this was the most amazing thing that I've ever experienced. I was able to cultivate experiences where two opposing sides can really come together and find a common ground. And so I really did fall in love with the passion of it all. I started my career in downtown Boston at the prestigious Catered Affair at the Boston Public Library. And at any given month, I would execute anywhere between 15 to 20 events for discerning clientele. I loved it so much. It was my dream job after college. And so much so that I would literally ride the train from Providence to Boston for months. And I was so dedicated and driven to be the best. And I finally mustered up enough money after college. And I found this like little apartment with 3 roommates in like the outskirts of Boston. I'm like, I am like steps away from my dream job. I thought I had it so mapped out. And so like 6 months after I landed my dream job as a wedding coordinator, And 10 days after I signed the lease and moved into my apartment in Boston, I was called into the office and they said, you know, you've done an amazing job, but I'm so sorry. It's the winter season and we have to lay you off. I'm like, what's a layoff? And little did I know that it was that unfortunately they wouldn't be able to keep me as part of their team. And I was crushed and I was so devastated. And I wish I had a great story about why I became an entrepreneur, but in all reality, it was kind of sheer desperation. But it really turned out to be, I always say that things happen in life for the good, and it was mandatory and it was necessary. But along the way, and I started my Delcy at 23 years old, and it's gone through multiple changes. There's been amazing highs. In 2020, I was named the top 28 wedding professionals to hire for your wedding day from Boston Magazine. I plan events throughout the nation now. And those are all of the highs, but I couldn't quite acknowledge the highs without saying that there were some really dark spots there. And so while that was the foundation of what I started out of desperation, it also gave me a greater platform to really live my values and what I believe. So I became an entrepreneur out of desperation. I stayed an entrepreneur because it gives me value and purpose, because I believe in supporting women-owned businesses and women unapologetically. I believe in supporting my community, and I can be the change that I wish to see. So it gives me so much passion. And I hope that's answered your question.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for sharing. Maybe a little bit later on, we can talk about more of the challenges, but Clarence, can you share with us your inspiration or what motivated you to start your own business?
Yeah, it all started back in actually 2002. I was in the prime of my career at the state police and was just very spoiled during that tenure with the amount of vacation time, always traveling. If I'm not working, I'm always on the go. And I knew at that point when I left the commercial enforcement unit, I spent 11 years in there, which is a agency that stops all the trucks throughout the state of Rhode Island coming and going. I used to work with that agency for 11 years, and I was the third in charge on that agency. And by going to all the federal and state schools, I got to know the laws, which more or less helped me to understand what it was all about and running and owning your own business. And at that point in time, just stopping a lot of the different commercial trucks and companies, not seeing that there was a person of color that were running a trucking firm. So at that point, I decided to open up S&S Trucking. I went in business with a relative of mine, and I did that for 2 years. We actually started the business in 2002, but we had a different vision. My vision was to expand, and his vision was eventually to go over the road. So we kind of split up. We had 2 trucks. We bought one. I took money out of I had rental property, so I refinanced rental property to actually start the business. And then, like I said, the plans changed, and so he took 1 truck, I took 1 truck. And the reason why I did start the business was because, one, being spoiled, I had 8 weeks of vacation during my tenure of being with the state police, and I knew when I retired from the state police, that I did not want to be involved with law enforcement anymore. I had an opportunity to come to Providence College and work because my classmate used to run the security over at Providence College. So I had several opportunities to go to Providence College. I could have went over to Salve, Regina. I could have went over to a lot of the different colleges within the state of Rhode Island, but the wages were kind of, $20, $25 an hour was what I wasn't used to. So at that point in time, when I did start S&S Trucking, when I restructured, once my relative and I split, I restructured the business at that time started SNS Trucking in 2004. It's been great. There's some challenges. Some of the biggest challenges is cash flow. But once you learn to manage cash flow and figure out what you need to do to hold on to cash flow, the downside of the business is possibly because it's seasonal and where we live here in the state of Rhode Island. But overall, it's been great. I really enjoyed it, and I continue to grow. And that is the reason why I started SNS. Thank you.
Thank you, Clarence. Lisa or E, do you want to share what motivated you to start your small business?
Sure, I could share. The first thing that motivated me was my father. He tried to start a few businesses here and there. He was an accountant, but he was a pretty good accountant, wasn't the best businessman. So I wanted to be a better businessman than he was. Immigrant family too. I'm first generation from Ghana and Barbados. So I have a certain certain work ethic that was instilled in me by them. My mother worked like 80 hours, still came home and cooked. And my dad still was helpful. And so I was always going to work. I enjoyed working. Again, wanted to try to do some things, my family couldn't, but they still, gave me those ideas. So my dad gave me a Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, which I would recommend to any students. I read that in college about 2021. I actually bought a three-family rental property my senior year, right before I graduated from URI. I thought I was gonna have like 20 by now. It didn't work out that way. So there's plenty of failure in there because I really started the business so I could, I worked for a few years in finance, worked for HSBC Financial around the time of the mortgage crash. So that impacted business. So that kind of pushed me out a bit as well. I could have stayed in, but so that, similar to Pearl, like the market around me was changing, but going back, I bought the three-family, and then I worked for a few years, and then I wanted to get out after a few years and start a business. I was going to buy into a franchise, and I researched different franchises, like Subways, all the ones and they're all very expensive. So the ones that were affordable, one of them was a dry cleaning business, pickup and delivery. So that's what I do. It's a pickup and delivery service primarily for laundry and dry cleaning. Like Johnson Wales is my best client, so we do students and go to people's homes and big offices like Hasbro and Blue Cross. So I looked at what they had to offer. Long story short, if you're buying a franchise, which I think is a good idea, maybe I'll do it again sometime because there's a lot to offer. You want it to be a recognizable name. Otherwise, because that's most of the premium that you're paying for a lot of stuff. The rest of it's just, the model, something you could read in a book or just learn from a good mentor. So I decided instead of buying the franchise, to start it myself and start with the school. And I just wanted to work with schools. I even tried Providence College, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get in. So maybe someone will get me in someday. But anyways, I started with Johnson Wales and then just started working with different offices, big companies in the area, individual homes. So I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. And in terms of, the background, going back to the immigrant background, just being a person of color, I just want to have control over my destiny. There's issues we have to deal with as people of color. I don't really, I frankly don't have time to, deal with all of them. When it comes to my economic prosperity and my future, I need to have control over that. So I figured, I do it myself and see what I could do. And it's worked out, pretty well. I could talk about plenty of failures and all that too, but that's the gist of how I started.
Thank you. We're going to ask some more questions about, I don't know if I'm echoing, sorry, about your challenges and being a person of color in the industry. But Lisa, if you wanted to share a motivation or an inspiration to begin before we keep going with our questions.
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much. And I think I'm wearing two hats. So I'm the president and founder of the Rhode Island Black Business Association, and I'm also, a owner of my consultant firm. So I'll talk a little bit about the association and why we started back in 2010 and became an organization that really advocates for more access for Black businesses. So Rhode Island Black Business Association, before we came about 10 years ago, There were no other organization in the state of Rhode Island that were advocating for Black business development, access for Black business to be able to get access to contracts and capital. Clarence earlier talked about cash flow. One of the things that has pretty much been a barrier to scale for many Black-owned businesses is really around access to capital, which means bankability, having fund on hand to buy material, payroll, and so forth. And then their access to opportunities like contracts with the state, city, and private sector. So that has been a roadblock for scaling, a roadblock for creating good paying jobs. We know that small businesses across the nation create more jobs, and we want small business and Black business in Rhode Island to do the same. We also know that Black businesses are the foundation of Black communities. Without strong Black businesses within communities, our communities are unable to thrive, right? Black businesses will see a huge reduction if we have companies at scale so they could create jobs. So my motivation for being one of the founding member of Rhode Island Black Business Association is to level the playing field. Back in 2010, I mobilized with community leaders and we talked about the issues that we saw as it relates to scalability of Black businesses. And we wanted to ensure that businesses were able to create jobs, right? And put real people to work. And, you know, hence the organization 10 years later, we're still advocating for greater access. And when I think about the beloved community, it's really all of us rolling up our sleeves. So you said earlier, Cam, about what can we do as a body, right? The student, as we think about empowerment. So what I would encourage the students to do is to think about the change that they want to see in the world. How can they be intentional in the work that they're doing, whether it's buying from a Black or a Latino firm, but going out of your way to spend money with underserved communities. I think that's a good thing. But I think, you know, if I had to tell my 21-year-old something, I would say, be bold, be ready to make your mark on society, and be risk taker. So again, you know, I would say you can be calculated risk taker, right? So I've spent over 20 years in corporate America, and I decided to leave in December to really scale my company. So Wrangling and Associates is a consulting firm that I founded back in 2012. And I decided to leave after a 20-year successful career. I left the banking world to scale my company because again, I've been running, you know, Reba for so long. I thought, why not go out and do what I do best? It's really high performer. But more importantly, I wanted to challenge myself to be a part of a greater good for the larger community. So when I think about what has happened with COVID-19, in addition to the pandemic, we also saw what happened with the social unrest as a result of the death of George Floyd. And I know with my background, my skill, I'll be able to drive greater changes in partnership with other organizations out there. So I'm so delighted to be here and I look forward to the conversation as we move forward.
Thank you all for sharing it. You guys already touched upon some of the aspects, but our next question is, I guess, what are some of the challenges as a small business owner of color that you have experienced? If you want to start off with us, Pearl or Clarence.
So I guess
I will, go ahead, Pearl.
So I guess I could start. I actually spoke on a panel about this in June of last year, and it was a very interesting industry-specific conversation as it relates to being a professional in the luxury hospitality market based here in New England. And I feel really grateful that I feel that our experiences are what shape us, and everyone has their own experiences. But my mom, being the Jamaican mother that she was, she instilled in me that I could do anything. And the barrier, the playing field, what would level the playing field or the barrier to it would not ever necessarily be the color of my skin. It would be the education behind it and lack thereof. So my mom placed a great emphasis on education and manners. And I thought that with those two things in my arsenal, that I would be okay. And so I went on to pursuing degrees in culinary arts and event management from Johnson Mills University. I landed my dream job in the heart of downtown Boston, serving prominent individuals, including President Obama himself. And I always had this, I always knew that situations that I experienced didn't quite feel right, but I didn't quite know that I was almost heartbroken to actually realize that people will judge other people based upon what they look like, and not because of their capabilities or what they bring to the table. But I'm so grateful that in a way I was almost guarded and jaded and naive for most of my adult life to actually think like, wow, like this is actually a thing. But I cannot deny it. And it is something that is very real within my community. And I am so grateful that I've allowed my work to speak for itself, so that what I bring to the table, who I am, doesn't need an introduction. I like to think that the organization that I've built and the community that I serve can see me for me. There are many challenges that do arise. I have a African American associate that works with me full time. I have a Caucasian associate that works with me full time. And I instill in these young women what I will instill in anyone I mentor. And that is literally, while you cannot change someone's mindset, or you cannot change how people approach you, you can, I do believe that showing up as the best version of yourself, all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. Just make sure that all you do is all you can do. But although I do see that it is a challenge, I often wonder if I didn't have the opportunity or to pay my way through college, which I did proudly, or I did have the mentors in my life, would my life be any differently? I often see in the luxury market my fellow counterparts being treated in some way, in several ways. And again, I don't have the answers to everything, but I try to be a part of the solution. So I am on the board of the National Association of Catering Executives New England, where I spearhead the diversity and inclusion initiatives, where we challenge the members of the most prominent hotels and businesses in our industry in New England to really think outside the box, to say, are we really being inclusive? I also, while I can't change anyone's opinion, I also know that I have a direct capacity to hire up to 20 companies for a single project. And I work on 18 projects, up to 18 projects a year. So that's hundreds of businesses that I'm able to support. I might not be able to write a check to every business, but I can certainly refer them based on not only because of that I know that they're quite capable and qualified, because they're excellent and they're the right fit. So that's how I combat the challenges that I faced throughout my career.
Thank you for that. And Clarence, do you have something to say with you?
Yes. The question, well, basically how I look at the question is, because of the industry that I'm in, people of color are not brought to the table. A lot of times when you start to bid on either put a bid together or request for a proposal, RFPs, a lot of times we're singled out, we're left out. A lot of times you have to more or less continue to be aggressive. Most of the time is like I have to ride by sites. either the state will call you and ask you, did you put in a bid for this particular project? You put a bid in for the project, but then you don't hear back from the project. Most of the time, I utilize the MBE and the DBE department for certain bids. There's all kinds of challenges. Some of the biggest challenges is because my company is not unionized. So I'll give you an example. Right now, there's a major project that's going on in Pawtucket. And several of the primes that I have worked with in the past called me and asked me to put a bid in. So I put a qualified bid in. It's a prevailing wage job, which is a federal job. Basically, it's got federal, I shouldn't say it's a federal job, but it has federal standards because you have to pay prevailing wage, because not being union qualified, then you have to agree to pay those wages, because say a carpenter is making $55 an hour, who maybe a driver who's driving trucks might be making $60 an hour. But if you was in the union, then you would have dibs to be able to get on that job. But now the union controls your business. So those are some of the key issues that I come across and I deal with all the time. And speaking on that particular project that I was talking about, they're building a new elementary school in Pawtucket. I know Gil Bain is actually the GC, which is the general contractor. There's several primes, like I said, that I have worked with, and I put a bid in. I ended up having to call the union hall in East Providence, and because they're still negotiating, I guess with their what their wages will be, they haven't had a chance to settle, or they told me basically they could not give me a substantial rate, because that rate is not going to stand. So those are some of the issues that you deal with by not being a union company. But overall, it's just challenging, because when you're not at the table, if you're not at the table, then you're not going to get the contract. You have to be at the table, and you have to make an effort to be there. And a lot of times we're not recognized, or we're not allowed to be there unless you more or less make it a point to be at the table. A lot of the projects as well, I should say, it's the good old boy syndrome, and I hate to use that phrase, but that's basically what I deal with. I mean, they're used to working with certain people, and they're not used to working with people of color. So you're always having to challenge yourself, and always have to prove yourself. By me being in business for the last 17 years, and I think because of my reputation and who I am, sometimes that kind of speaks for itself. Because usually when they see me, it's like, oh, you're the guy that used to stop the trucks. So then you get an opportunity, but it shouldn't be that way. It should be more or less, yeah, S&S does great work, because most of the time when we do come to those projects, we always represent, and the people that I have working for me know that I'm very on point. I usually tell my employees, when you go to a project, the project starts at 7 o'clock. I want you there at 6:45, because if you're there anytime after 6:45, you're late. And the reason why that is because we're always trying to put up a great show, that we're capable of doing the job, and that we want to be recognized for the amount of work that we do. But those are some of the issues that I deal with all the time for not being a unionized company. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a two-part question for E and Lisa. What impact does your business have on the local community, and how can we be change makers in our own consumption?
Yeah, so I'll just throw out a couple of things. So thank you for that question. So, when I think about the impact of Rhode Island Black Business Association and the impact of my profit company, I think more from, as I noted earlier, before the Rhode Island Black Business Association, Black businesses were shut out of opportunities. Back in 1986, there was a law that was enacted to ensure that 10% of state dollars should go to minority and women-owned firm in the state of Rhode Island. So 1986, and now we're talking about 2021, is probably going on 32 years later. And that law has never, ever been complied with. So when we think about barriers to scale, as it relates to business development and impact, companies could do a lot more if they were allowed, I don't want to use the word allow, if they had access. So as we think about diversity and inclusion and supplier and diversity, I think it's important for us to think about how can we ensure that when we're hiring a company, or when we're looking to do business with a company or companies, that we're thinking about diversity and inclusion and equity in a meaningful way. Too often when we look at the Black community, we say their quality of work is not good enough. So one of the things that REBA has done, Rhode Island Black Business Association, is to change the narrative. One is to say our businesses are in fact at scale. Yes, they can compete at any level with any other company, and they should get access to opportunities and access to contracts so they too can create needed job in our state. So again, it comes back to companies and organizations like PC, Providence College, look at their diversity and supplier and say, who am I spending business with or money with? And look at their supply chain and say, should we ensure that we have women-owned firm a part of the companies that we're doing business with? Should we ensure that we're doing business with Black-owned companies? So when I think about what I have done and what REBA has done, we have been at the partner at the table with the former president of PC, Father Hanley. I served in a capacity as an advisor to him. And I think one of the things that they wanted to do was to really impact supplier and diversity at the college, right? And that's through intentional work. It's not going to just happen by itself. So the organization has changed the narrative over the last 10 years. Another thing that we have done as an organization is to partner with governors throughout the state and elected officials across the state as it relates to thinking about ways that they can create better synergies with the prime, Clarence talked about the prime contractors and sub. What we have seen within the Black community is a lack of networking opportunities. People tend to do business with who they know. And if Black businesses are not at the table and they don't have this large network of people, to Clarence's earlier point, we're shut out of opportunities. So what REBA has done is to partner with larger companies like Gilbane and Demio, an organization like Providence College, to really have them think about how are they reaching out and being intentional about supplier and diversity, right? So if you're buying paper goods, there's a great company, Black-owned firm in Cranston. Can you get your paper goods, which is your napkins, things for your cafeteria and whatnot? Should you be doing business with them? If you're looking for a cleaning company, should you be thinking about going to a Black association and say, who do you have as part of your directory that we should be doing business with, right? So that's really impact. And when we think about legislation, so one of the things that we're doing now in partnership with elected officials is to look at that legislation that I mentioned that was established back in 1986 to ensure that it has teeth. And what do I mean by that? To ensure that it is actually going to do what it was developed to do, right? Is to ensure that we have full participation. When I think about my consultant firm, Regan and Associates, that firm is really around partnering with corporate companies such as large companies in the state that are thinking about diversity and inclusion around their professionals, right? So when we think about how do we hire, how do we ensure that Black folks are staying within these companies? And do you have biases in your hiring practices? Do you have biases in your promotional, and how do you bring somebody on? So if somebody has a Black name, do you give them an interview or you don't give them an interview, right? So those are kind of the things that my firm is really charged with doing, is to help companies think about, one, their hiring practice, and ensure that, best practices is throughout their organization, and to not think about it from a nice thing to do, right? But it's the right thing to do. Too often, when people think of diversity and inclusion, they think of, I have a Black friend, or, oh, I have a Black photo, right? Somebody's in a photo on a wall and there's a Black person or a brown person, right? And what we're talking about is to go beyond that, those superficial things, and to think about how can we ensure that diversity, equity, inclusion is included in everything that we do from an organization perspective. Hopefully I answered that question.
Yes, thank you so much. That's helpful. And E, if you want to talk about the impact of your business and how we can be change makers.
Sure. Yeah, I'm proud to be like so many other small businesses and employ people and contribute to the overall economy. So, you know, having a few employees, but also in particular, some of the vendors I work with, they're actually from South America, South American immigrants, and I love working with them. Actually, the one of the people I work with, my primary vendor, her brother is actually working on a real estate project for me. So just, you know, and I, you know, obviously we have something in common, just being, you know, immigrants are first generation. So in terms of, you know, the good old boy network, which is very real, social capital is an issue in the community, and just creating more social capital, being someone that people could turn to for advice, and, you know, someone that you could do business with. So I think that, you know, that's an impact that I have, and just being in a network, being a part of organizations like Rhode that are very helpful, just being you know, helpful in that way, being one of the members that, you know, gets involved and promotes it and is involved with events like this. So just being a part of that bigger network. And in terms of what we could do about consumption, as Lisa mentioned, just being intentional about where you you know, purchase certain products from. Just look to see, you know, is it minority owned? You know, do you want to support minority owned businesses? And be honest with them about it in a respectful way, because especially within the Black community, people, you know, say different things, like they don't support their own, for, you know, Black businesses for different reasons, usually just myths. But either way, if you have something, just be honest with them. I love constructive criticism, so you let me know, you know, not obviously publicly, because that that defeats the purpose of supporting. And then you know, we could all grow from there. You know, everyone needs to learn and grow from just the transactions between different groups in the community. So so yeah, it's always good to just increase the social capital by everyone working together and being intentional about who we do business with.
Thank you for that. Thank you. We have some questions from the audience. What advice would you give someone who wants to start his or own business? Anybody can answer this.
Yeah, I'll quickly just say, work with someone, get actual experience doing it, and you know, if you could shadow someone, that's always helpful. And then just fail fast, which is something I wish I did. Just like, you know, give yourself a timeline, a couple of years, whatever years, for whatever you want to do, and try something else. You can always go back to it. So rather than you know, spending a lot of time going in circles, which could easily happen, especially in business. It's very time consuming.
So I would just want to add really quickly, what I would suggest is be sure that there is a market for it, right? So it's very important to think about who are you going to be selling? Is there a gap today that you're actually trying to satisfy, right? Also understand your competitors. So if you're going into a market, is there a competitor that's doing exactly the same thing? And what differentiates you from somebody else, your competitor, right? And make sure it's a purpose-driven effort that you're going on. Just don't do it for the sake of going in, right? Because when you're starting a business, we know that companies that start up in the first 2-3 years, they die off because either burned out or there, you know, really wasn't a good business case or a proof of concept. So as E noted, try it out, right? Make sure there's a market for it, and then figure out how you're going to fund it, right? What does that cash flow look like that you have on hand, right? Too often we said we want to start something and we have $0, or we don't have a family or a friend that can loan us some funding. And it's very difficult to start something if you have $0, right? So those are kind of the big points that I would say. And I think be open to be, you know, taking risk and just do it. Like the Nike commercial, just go ahead and do it, right? And as E noted, be open to find and seek out people. People want to help, right? don't be afraid to ask. I've been asking everybody as I think about scaling my company, and I've been doing this for a while. But again, it's important to build your network so everybody knows what you're doing and how they can help you, right, as you grow and advance. And Pearl, feel free.
So I completely agree. I think that learning from a proven mentor is so essential. And then also, in addition, thinking about what do you need in order to be successful, from taking your dream from a dream to reality. As Lisa had mentioned, there's resources that need to happen. I think that I would like to add two pieces of advice, because I think the first one is that there are many barriers to, I guess, birthing a dream of starting a business, right? But I think confidence is essential. And I think it's just a practical thing, right? So while there are many limitations, just think to yourself, like, you can learn anything, and ask. Like, oh my gosh, if I could save anyone years, just asking for help will go a long way. Asking when you don't know. And then also having a plan. I know that many resources will say, just jump into it. And while you certainly don't have to wait for like your business plan to be packaged up nicely and wrapped in a bow before you take the first move, I would encourage you to kind of just think through how are you going to make it sustainable, and really ask yourself the hard questions. Why am I doing this? What is my why? Because you'll need to know that when times get really hard, which they will, but it's part of the process before you become successful.
Can I just add to that? I concur with all my colleagues that are in business here on this panel. But at the same time, like Lisa said, research is probably the biggest thing. Know who you're more or less competing against. Know whether or not whatever type of business you're going to begin or start, whether or not you're going to be able to make a living on it. And also remember that when you start a business, like Lisa said, the first 3 to 5 years is usually the failing efforts. And at the same time, remember that sometimes you might not even get a paycheck. I mean, there's been many times when I have worked all week, and it's a little different for me because I have a retirement. But there's been many times where I didn't get paid. I had just enough money to pay my employees, but I didn't have time to pay myself because there wasn't enough resources there. So, there's a lot of different factors that come into play when owning your own business. It's a great thing, you know what I mean? It's motivating. I mean, you feel good about it because you're the CEO, you're the person in charge, but at the same time, there's a lot of other factors that come into play as well. So, you definitely have to do your research. You have to know who you're competing against. And at the same time, make sure that you have the resources and the dollars available to sustain, because sometimes being in business, and especially in construction, there's projects, most of the time I try to get paid within 7 days. I mean, when I first started out, they used to tell you 30 days, and I don't, most projects I work on today, I don't wait 30 days. It's either 7 or 14. And if I can't get paid in 7 or 14, then it's wasting my time. I won't even more or less venture with that particular project. But if you're doing federal funding on a project, you know what I mean, then you have no choice because they have the upper hand and they're going to tell you it's 90 days. So resources is a major factor, in cash flow is a major factor.
Thank you. I just want to remind the participants that if you have another question, you can submit it in the Q&A. We have a couple in there right now. My next question is, we know that MLK spoke of the beloved community, and that has been this convocation's focus for the entire month. So we just want to ask, how do you develop a beloved community within your business, and how does MLK impact the work that you do?
I'll start out. One, I think how MLK has impacted my business. It has allowed people of color uh, within the state to be at the table uh, by not discriminating against us because of our race, color, creed, and ethnicity. Also, it has helped me to try to put people of color to work. I mean, that is one of the biggest things that I enjoy is I wish that my employees, I have 5 employees. Actually, I should have more, but with COVID hitting last year, I laid off 4 and I only kept um, 2 other employees. I had 1 employee that worked for me last year, ended up going up to Maine and taking a job on with Nestle's, running water back and forth. He had property up in Maine, and him and his wife just had a little boy. So he ended up leaving my company because with COVID coming into play with all the restrictions and everything, a lot of the projects that I had contracts for never started. So it was like it was very scarce last year trying to find work. But one of the biggest things that I think that MLK has done has leveled the playing field. It opens the eyes for more people to realize that Black businesses are here and that we are very qualified and we're able to do the work. And you just need an opportunity. Don't get discouraged. I always try to put people of color to work. I mean, I don't care who you are, but I would rather have my own kind working for me because it's challenging out there for people of color trying to get a job. I always stress to people of color when it comes to a license. A license is a privilege. When you see a lot of what they call OTR, which is over the road drivers. You see a lot of over the road drivers, Black drivers that have CDLs. But when you look around the state, and with me being out in this particular uh, industry, you don't see a lot of people of color driving trucks. And I wish I could get more people of color. Um, and that is one of the biggest things that I think is the downsides of it. But I'm happy to be in business. Uh, we're an equal opportunity employer. I mean, I'll give anybody an opportunity. Women, I have had women work for me. I'll tell you what, it's amazing having a young lady work for you and drive a truck because you can see how guys or how because when you think of construction, you think of it as a male industry, but there's a lot of women that are working in construction, and I'm not talking about flaggers. I'm talking about carpenters. I'm talking about welders, uh, drivers. I mean, there's a lot of women out there driving. I had a young lady call me the other day from New Jersey who went down to North Carolina to work and called me. We put an ad in Indeed. I just hired 4 guys, and she's well qualified. So she said to me, Clarence, I really want to work for your company. I said to her, well, when you come back up this way, just give me a call. So it's interesting to know that the level of playing field is there, but you have to be willing and you have to be determined, and at the same time, uh, as as I would say, always always look for somebody who is qualified and make sure they're a perfect fit for your company. Thank
I'll quickly just say that a lot of what he did was reduced, unfortunately, to like just civil rights and to the "I Have a Dream" speech. But a lot of what he did was about economic empowerment. A lot of it with lower income workers. I think around the time he was assassinated, he was working with sanitation workers. And there's a speech. It's an interview, and he talks about us coming to get our check. So just look up that interview. It's really good. Coming to get our check, and it's based off of. He talks about how some of the European farmers and the like were given different subsidies by the government. So long story short, the need to bridge the gap, the civil rights and economic empowerment, economic rights. There's or there's a lot of parallels there, and you can't really have one without the other. So I'm focused on the economic part of it for sure. We have civil rights for the most part, but we definitely have to focus on the economic rights to really bridge a lot of gaps that we deal with. So I appreciated that about MLK.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I'll just add, I think one of the things MLK talked about was around injustices, right? So he talked about, when I think of the beloved community, I think about injustice anywhere is a threat to all of us, right? So when we think about how can we be change makers, how can we ensure that we are being able to treat everyone the way that we would like to be treated? And I think that's what Martin Luther King Jr. would have wanted. And when we see what is happening in our society today, whether it's around the rollout of vaccine where Black and Brown communities are being left behind or continue to be marginalized in the lack of access, and you see people are fighting for access to good paying jobs, Dr. Martin Luther King, his work really is about empowerment. It's about us treating each other the way that we would want to be treated. And when you speak of that beloved community, it's a community where all of us can thrive. All of us have access to opportunities to live out this American dream. So when I think about his legacy and the work that we're doing in our community collectively, it's really about that. It's really about ensuring that we are thinking about the less fortunate, thinking about those people that maybe on the fringes of society, there could be homelessness, right? We know with the pandemic, people have lost their job. We're seeing an increase in food insecurity, housing insecurity, right? When we think about this, all of these barriers, right? We're talking about real people. And I know if Dr. Martin Luther King was here today, he would say we're absolutely better together and stronger together. So I am so excited to be here and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And, the beloved community belongs to all of us. And we just got to make our mark and, do what he would do, spread love. As he talked about, love wins always. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
I suppose that I'll add very quickly when I think about MLK, I think about and how his presence in his beloved community. I think about that he was a man of action, and that the philosophy that he so believed in, it was further accentuated by his actions. And so I often think if he were to have taken the approach that I am one person, and what change can I be to the world? Where would we be? Or how less significant would his life be? So when I think about MLK and the beloved community, I often think being the change that you wish to see within your community. And while there might be so many things that are going on, it takes one person to start a chain reaction. So when you are thinking about the change that you wish to see, let's think about the actions that we're doing on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be anything astronomical. It can be in the everyday things, and who knows, you might be the one that inspires others to be the change that you wish to see within your beloved community.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all of our panelists for joining and for our students for moderating this event. There is so much information that you just shared, a lot for us to be able to reflect on and think about. I do just want to share one more time the QR code for any of our business students that might be joining that need to scan this for their point system that they'll be using. But I really appreciate, again, all of the time and expertise that you were able to share with us this evening. And for all of those in attendance, thank you so much for joining us. And with that, I am going to stop our recording.